Hey, Shiv. You okay?
Hey.
It was quite something to walk into that room after such a long scene and, to be alive to the atmosphere in the room was, it was quite sort of palpable.
Because of the nature of like how he does shoot, where you always go beyond what is written on the page, you just sort of know to stay in it until he calls cut.
Hi, my name's Mark Mylod. I'm a director and producer on Succession.
I'm Sarah Snook. I play Shiv.
My name's Matthew Macfayden and I play Tom Wormsgans.
And this is Variety's Making the Scene.
Hey.
Hey. Hello. Hello. What's all this then?
Hi everyone. Hi.
Hey, Carl.
Hi.
We're just feeling a little out of the loop, Dad.
Before we started in production on season 3, I was talking with Jesse Armstrong, the show's creator, about the shape of the season. And at that stage, he really just had building blocks. And the one thing we absolutely knew at that stage, that the season would end with this climactic scene. And Matthew's character, Tom, his betrayal of Shiv, his wife.
Jesse and I had a conversation before we started shooting season 3, in which he sort of outlined the shape of Tom's character arc, culminating in a possible betrayal. Then I sort of forgot about it because you worry about telegraphing something which in fact may or may not happen because Jesse might change his mind. So the finale, it wasn't a surprise, but it was a surprise in the way it was written. And part of me thought, well, maybe it won't be. Maybe it won't be me who does the dirty in the end.
There's a lot of pressure, I guess, to get it right. And so we'd scheduled to shoot it over 2 days, unfortunately with a weekend in between, which was going to be difficult. And because of the nature of the scene, there's upwards of 8 people with all conflicting objectives and opinions and desires in the scene so there are scenes within the scene as well. So yeah, it's a pretty, in terms of scenes, it's a monster one.
It was scary with that one because we were and still are obviously in the throes of the pandemic. There was huge doubt whether we'd actually be able to safely travel to Italy. So we were trying to prep a US-based version of those last 2 episodes. Luckily, as it turned out, we were able to shoot there. In terms of that specific location, Logan's villa, we've been looking at much more classical Renaissance palaces and much older structures. And I'd gone to see this one slightly reluctantly. I knew it was a relatively new build, but as soon as I saw it, I just loved it because it just smacked of power. When you went in there, it felt like a mausoleum. It was really intriguing, and it was so not what we talked about. And Jesse and I went back and forth on it, and agreed it was just perhaps a fresher way to go.
We might be wrong, but we're hearing rumors about Gojo.
Yeah, that we might be the target now. Is that right, Dad?
When I first read the script, I was just as shocked as I imagine the audience, hopefully, were as well, finding out about the betrayal of Tom. I was very like, my God, how dare he? How absolute dare he?
Throughout season 3, we were working to earn that moment, exploring that marriage of Shiv and Tom's and how that was falling apart and subtly, and Tom's gradual stewing of that to get it to the point where actually we had to just earn that Tom would do that, and through his eyes would have no choice but to do that.
I mean, he has had this awful threat of prison hanging over his head for much of the show. When he's released from that threat of going to prison and they're just going to have to pay a fine, that probably Siobhan, his wife, she's maybe not that concerned, and maybe she's sort of almost slightly disappointed. So it's a sort of growing realization that maybe, his wife isn't his he can't really trust her, and he does offer himself to Logan, as the sacrificial lamb, and Logan accepts. So he has some currency with his father-in-law and his boss.
I don't trust him. Roman.
You can tell us together, Dad.
Knowing the siblings were going to be aligned, it gave it a new energy, and also knowing that we couldn't rely on or fall back on regular, usual dynamics where, You know, there's a general patter or a flow to a scene that you understand because this is how the characters relate to each other. But now the characters are relating in such a different way. It kind of raises the attention, I think, to how we perform or what choices we make and what sort of spontaneous choices are made in the moment. And it meant also that, like, even though they are unified, there is still that regular dynamic between them. So there is sort of, you are running it through a filter of like, do I agree with them in this moment, or am I going to be annoyed at them? Like, or is that a good thing where I'm annoyed at them and then come to the agreement?
We don't talk a lot in advance. We've evolved this creed of spontaneity so that I try to get it so that the very first take is everybody's first instinct, which more often than not is actually a brilliant and a right instinct. And we know enough to kind of trust each other initially and then to explore. And the joy of working on Succession as a director, and when you get scenes like this to chew into, is that jumping in and molding and experimenting. We never do the same take twice. The cameras will always be sniffing out different moments and different reactions. And it's a very amorphous process, which somehow ends up, I think, for me anyway, in a really satisfying scene.
Mark had actually put the cameras right on the edges of the room. They weren't so much in amongst us, which is unusual for us. Usually you can feel the camera person dancing within you more. But this, they were much more long lens, voyeuristic on the edges, which adds to the feeling of the scene, but then also the performance of it, where it does become more insular between us, where you can really focus on the character and the actor opposite you.
This is the best moment to sell. If I don't do the best deal at any given point, what's the point of anything?
Logan, the ultimate chess player, who's always 3 chess moves ahead of any opposition. Once he's got them into the room, the first thing he will do will try charm. That'll be move 1. When that fails, he moves on to his more standard divide and conquer and trying to separate Roman. If we do a direct comparison between season 1, there's that moment where Roman's hand comes up and is, you better be sniffing your armpit, Romulus. And of course, he capitulates at that point. And this is a very different Roman. In that moment, despite his desperate need for his father's approval, that maturity is what allows him in this place to actually stay strong against him when his father does exactly as he would have expected.
I have you beat!
Well, no, because you need a supermajority in the holding company.
Because I need a supermajority.
I remember reading it for the first time and I was like, oh, that doesn't feel nice. That's like that hearing your dad mimic you back to yourself in a really like playground, little bitchy school kid kind of way is like, I don't know, just the immaturity of it is really painful in a way. And he did it so well every time. And that's fun then as well, because if you give different versions and know that Brian is always going to parrot it back to you, then you can throw the ball in a slightly different way and know that he's going to catch it, and it then hurts even more.
Caroline, you're on with Roman, Kendall, and Siobhan.
Hi, Mom.
Mom?
With Caroline on the phone call, and that phone call coming in, initially in our first draft of the script, she'd been in the room, and there was going to be a late reveal in that Logan would when Logan chose to actually show his hand, his winning hand, there was an antechamber side room where he would basically open the door and invite Caroline in. We felt ultimately that felt a bit too dada, and therefore, and there's something about that awful kind of impersonal, ghostish voice out of us on a speakerphone, which would just seem colder.
It's the twist, and the knife is already in there, but she's just continuously being a disappointing mother figure. She was in London at the time as well, which made it even, there was just sort of this distance and distance in the way that she performed it as well.
Dad?
Hey.
Mr. Roy. Hold on a second.
When he leaves the room, I think it's really that he's allotted that certain amount of time. He has this all night, he's got to get this business deal. He's just got other priorities, and that is done and dusted. And now he's got to go to the other wing to carry on with the next piece of business is for that evening. It's that cold.
Right at the end of this, 9-10 page scene, the door opens and Logan storms out and sees Tom coming up the stairs. And there's that moment that Siobhan sees through the open door.
The doorways there provided this perfect opportunity for me to just have the doorway open the right amount, so that when Logan makes that exit and finding Sarah in the right position, we could make that visual connection. She would be in exactly the right eye line where nobody else would be. And perhaps Logan would assume that he had privacy in that moment to try and bring as much, to feel as uncontrived as possible in that moment, that he would assume privacy in that gesture.
Hey, Shiv. You okay?
Hey.
Hey.
Yeah,
The script was always very clear that Shiv would see Tom, would see that, and that would be the end of the season. And perhaps we would find ourselves in an echo of an earlier scene where the siblings had clung together and supporting each other like after the raft of the Medusa. We'd shot that sequence somewhat chronologically. So we'd already shot the alleyway sequence. And I think it was just Jeremy's instinct in the moment to return that tactile support. But it didn't feel right to cut to black.
Because of the nature of like how he does shoot, where you always go beyond what is written on the page, you just sort of know to stay in it until he calls cut. And really just like asking, what would Shiv do? What would Tom do? What would everybody do in this moment?
It was quite something to walk into that room after such a long scene. And, you know, to be alive to the atmosphere in the room was, you know, it was quite sort of palpable. I think we rehearsed it once. It wasn't a big sort of working out process between the two of us.
After a few takes that were not going the right way, I think it was just an instinct to come towards the camera, to basically walk into her own close-up. And of course, Matthew's character followed. And then they walked into this tight two-shot and I could see her face. Matthew's character could not.
I didn't see what she was doing until I watched it. She looks like she's going to sort of rip me to pieces and throw up at the same time. And it's just absolute shock. And
then you had that juxtaposition, and we, the audience, were the voyeurs who could see that rage, and that was just that, oh, okay, now we've got it, which felt really good.
It's such a treat working on the show because of the writing, because of everyone's so talented, the other actors are brilliant, but the writing is a real gift. It's really exciting every day.